Good morning, students. Today we are going to discuss about the second chapter of Communicative English as per the syllabus of Aribat Knowledge University. And the title of this chapter is Principles of Communication. Whenever we talk about communication, as discussed in the first chapter of communication skills, that there are certain objectives which are very important in order to understand the importance of communication. Now, apart from the objective, we have also studied about the process of communication. We also discussed about the different types of communication, the barriers which may affect the communication, and if you really want to master the skill of communication, what are the steps that we have to take in order to hone the skill. Now, today in this particular chapter, we are going to discuss about principles of communication. The moment once when somebody says principles of communication, these are certain rules, certain basic norms which every human being, every individual will have to apply in their day-to-day life. Not only in our personal life, even in the professional life, whenever we are talking about communication, this plays a very significant role. Now, the moment once when we are talking about principles of communication, the thing that comes in our mind is the way we are going to inform others, the way we are going to educate others, the way we are going to share the information with others, that we are going to discuss with the people will be detailed in a proper format, in a proper way. Unless and until if the information is not shared in a clear format or in a clear cut manner, people may not find it easy to understand, and then their interpretations may go wrong. So therefore, let us understand about the principles of communication. Now, the first principle that we are going to discuss would be the completeness. Moment I want to communicate with you all, the information that I wish to share with you all should be complete. Incomplete information, when shared, when discussed, will create or will leave people with certain doubts. So it is very important to understand that whatever we want to communicate should be complete in nature. Now, when I say complete, it means the information should be in full and final form. For example, uses of phrases. Whenever you are using a phrase, if it is not indicated to the subject and the subject is finding it very difficult to identify the object based on which the phrase is used, you cannot understand. For example, get up, bring the book. Now, whom am I asking? What they are willing to do, whether it is asked to one individual or is representing the whole of the group. It's very difficult. It's quite confusing. So therefore, now if I use the same sentence with a name, for example, Niru, bring the book. Now here it is very clearly understood that it is being identified with the name of the person, that is Niru. It is asked to her that she should carry the books, she should bring the books. So therefore it is very important to understand that whenever we talk about communication skill, the first and the most important part is completeness of the communication. So therefore whenever we talk about completeness, these are the common features which we have to keep in our mind. First of all, the sender and receiver will get a clear-cut understanding what is being delivered and what is being decoded by the receiver from the sender's viewpoint. Now, complete communication also gives value-added information. If you are sharing any of the information which is incomplete, trust me, it will definitely create confusion. People will remain in dilemma. So therefore, in order to get rid of those dilemmas, it is very important to have a complete piece of information. And at the same time, it also helps the communicator to take the decisions in a proper way. The second principle is conciseness. Mind you all, too much of information delivery is again bad. When a lot is said, a lot is spoken, when a lot is informed to the people, it becomes a bit difficult for the person to remember each and everything in a proper way. So therefore, the thumb rule or the principle of communication says that we have to be very concise in our speech. We have to keep it very simple and short. Why? Because it saves our time, it saves our cost, it helps us to focus on the right words so that the communicator can deliver in a right way and the receiver can understand in a right way. This is the major part of effective communication. Unless and until you are not concise in your speech, people will not be able to remember and understand. So therefore, always remember, keep it very simple and short. The last and not the least, whenever we are talking about concise messages, we are trying to comprehend our information. We are trying to reach up to the candidates with the right appeal, with the right connotation so that the person can understand in a very simple and easy way. The third principle of communication is consideration. The moment when we communicate, we have to remember that when we communicate, we want to share some information. If we do not consider the person and if we do not keep their level of understanding in our mind, it becomes very difficult to share the information, to understand, to analyze, and to interpret. Why? Because I may not have that knowledge, I may not have those skills to interpret, and my level of understanding is not at par. So therefore, whenever we communicate, the first thing was to share the information completely. The second point was to share it with a concise message. The third and the most important is we need to consider the level of audience. What is their level of understanding? How much can they take from your end? How much can they digest? How much is their appetite to understand the information? So therefore, it is very important that the concentration should be taken into care whenever we are talking about the principles of communication. If you want to really be a good communicator, it is very important to take into consideration the level of your audience, who the audience are, what is their level of understanding, whether they can understand your words, that they can understand your language. When I say language, I'm talking about both the language that I'm using, that is English right now, and even my body language, whether they can understand my body language or not. So therefore, it is very important to understand the audience. And when I say understanding the audience, remember the word empathize. When I use empathize, I mean to say that I keep myself exactly in the same position the audience are there at that particular moment. So therefore, once when we are talking about empathy or empathizing with the audience, keep yourself into their shoes and then interpret, then understand how they are going to react and how they are going to respond to your communication. Your response should be stimulative. If it is not inviting their responses, if it is not encouraging the audience to respond, then it will become one-way communication. And remember, one-way communication is not always a good communication. You always have to encourage your audience to respond so that you can understand that yes, whatever is being delivered is delivered in a right way, and the receiver has understood in a right manner. And always remember, audience over here, when I talk about consideration, my key focus is on audience. So the audience should be in a position to understand what is delivered to them in a right tone and in a right way. The next, this consideration comes only when there is clarity in your voice, clarity in your language, clarity in your speech, clarity in your thought. There has to be proper understanding of what you want to convey, to whom you want to convey, so that the right person can get it noted. So the third one was consideration. The fourth, when we are talking about the principles of communication, talks about clarity. The clarity part is very important, be it in your language, be it in your body language, be it in your speech, everywhere you need to have this clear-cut understanding at what time you are willing to communicate. Please remember, communication, when is done, you have to understand the mind, you have to understand the body language of the audience. If you are sharing any information wherein the audience is not in the position to accept your information, then your communication will be considered as miscommunication, or there will be a gap between your communication. So therefore, make sure that there has to be a proper clarity. Bridge up the gaps so that the person can understand it in a very clear manner. Avoid using jargons. Keep it very simple and easy so that the person can understand. If you are talking to a layman, don't use jargon. Now let me explain you what is a jargon. Jargons are those words which are in general not used by all of us. So for example, when I say a word OJT, now the person who is studying any of the professional courses, when they have to do some project for a month or two with one or the other organization, they get associated. That is called as on-job training. And this on-job training, the abbreviation of on-job training is OJT, which is commonly used in colleges. But if I am talking to a person who had never been to college, or who is very young, or who hasn't come across this particular word OJT or the abbreviation OJT, for them this becomes a jargon. So therefore, always remember, if you are talking, if you are communicating, if you are sharing information, avoid using jargons. The fifth is concreteness. This concreteness is related to the information that we are sharing should be backed or should be supported by certain facts and figures. If I say India is a developing country, how am I going to prove it, whether India is really a developing country or not? I have to give a certain facts, certain figures to it, that out of 29 states, these are the number of states which are performing very well. Say, for example, if I'm talking about cities, if I'm talking about places which are really performing extremely good and they are competing with the other competitive or developed nations, how their importance is being shown, or how you can prove that their work or their kind of involvement in the job is beneficial in strengthening the economy. There is a fact connected with it, there is a figure connected with it. So therefore, whenever we talk about concreteness of communication, we have to back it, we have to support it with certain evidential fact and supports. That support or that evidential fact that we are going to add should be correct one. You cannot bluff, you cannot share some kind of information just for the sake of saying. Remember that your information should be right, your information should be properly portrayed so that the person can understand it in a very simple way. Never ever give any wrong information. The sixth communication principle of communication is courtesy. Remember, when we expect respect from others, we have to give respect to them first. If there is no courtesy in your communication, people will never love to hear to you. They will ignore your words. They will ignore your body language. So therefore, it is very important to understand the importance of courtesy. If you are courteous in your speech, if you're courteous in the way you are going to communicate, people will love to listen to you. So always remember the language that you are using, the kind of words that you're going to pick, the kind of sentences that you're going to frame should always be courteous, with full of respect, with full of value giving to the other person, so that the audience should love reading or should love to interact with you with a clear-cut identity that yes, the person is talking, keeping into consideration my viewpoint or taking into consideration my viewpoints. Therefore, courtesy plays a very important role. Last but not the least, the next principle of communication that we are going to discuss today would be correctness. Whatever information that we share should be correct. Incorrect information will create lots of confusion. Incomplete or incorrect information may also challenge your own identity. So therefore, you have to always keep in your mind that correctness of the information is very, very important, and you have to value it. You have to take care of it. The information that you're going to share, people may have lots of importance, or people may have lots of respect for your words. So whenever you communicate, you have to keep these things in your mind, that all these 7 principles, which is also called as 7 C's of communication. When I say the 7 C's, let me reiterate: the completeness of communication. Then the next one is the concreteness of your communication, the clarity of your communication, the correctness of your communication, the consideration that we are going to take, and last but not the least, the conciseness. So whenever we are talking about these 7 C's of communication, these 7 C's plays a very important role and very pivotal role in our day-to-day life. Even when you are writing, even when you are speaking, even when we are sharing an information, we have to apply these 7 principles of communication if we really want to create an effective impact on the audience. So always remember, the correctness of the communication is very important, because people will respect you based on these 7 C's. So if you take into consideration, or if you are really willing to bring efficient and effectiveness in your communication, you have to start improving and start thinking on these 7 C's. You have to really work out on these 7 C's. If you are working out on these 7 C's, trust me, your communication is going to improve. People will start respecting you. People will start liking to discuss and share their problem, so that you can communicate and you can share, even you can give your valuable advice to them. So that's all in this particular class. We are going to come with some new topic in the next class. Till then, take care of yourself. Goodbye.